we're going to start by asking you just to tell us your name, what you do, who you work for, and where you're based.
Sure. My name's Henry Gordon Smith. I'm an urban agriculture consultant for Agritecture Consulting, which is my company based in Brooklyn, New York.
We're at the end of the seminar, and I want to know, has there been any aha moments for you, or either things that clarified something that you had already thought about, or something that challenged something that you assumed?
I think the key aha moment for me was that this discussion itself helps us improve the way we engage with society, my work personally, and the people around us. So if we don't talk about the future, if we don't estimate the future, we're going to have a very difficult time achieving the future. And I think I'd never really done it in such a group environment. So my aha was, this works. This is a model that can help us accelerate forward. I think other discoveries really related around the emphasis of technology. And I struggle to kind of disconnect, are we just obsessed with technology now because it's proliferated through our lives, or is that really going to be the next stage of society? And I don't have the answer to that one.
Okay, great. One of the things, just kind of building on what you were saying, is we had kind of something that was woven throughout the whole consultation was the idea of creating future intelligence. That it's not just for the academics or for the leaders, but it's something that everyone should be educated about. And first of all, do you think that they are, and that people are, and then also, why do you think that's important?
So I was just talking to David after the event, and I said, this was such a positive experience. And for me, as a young teenager, I started imagining my future, and I started engaging in this process of manifesting my future, and it's made an enormous transformation in my life. And so I think it's hugely critical that more people engage in it. I don't think most people do. So I think there's huge potential for it. I don't think it's nearly leveraged enough by cities or individuals or businesses even.
And you think that it should be something like that people should just think that, you want to be knowledgeable about X, but how do you make that transition where people think, I really want to be knowledgeable about the future? Because it's not just some Star Wars thing, but it's actually real.
I think my message to people who don't see the value in that would be, society is more complex than it was before, and it's getting more complex. And so the linear path for your career, for your family life, for where you're going to live, for how external factors like the climate or economy are going to affect you, they're not linear anymore in the way that they used to be. And so if you're not engaging in estimating those possible futures, you're simply unprepared emotionally and intellectually for the situations that are inevitably going to be complex in the future. So it's a survival and adaptation strategy that I would encourage anybody that hasn't engaged in it to engage in it.
What, just moving ahead to for yourself and thinking about the future, let's say 2040, what is the one thing that you're most scared about, and what is the one thing that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I'm genuinely scared. Some people say I'm too afraid or too alarmist about climate change and its effects on our society. I tend to be in the camp that we should invest in adaptation even more than mitigation, because I just don't see us as a global society collaborating on mitigation. So the thing I'm most afraid of is that we aren't prepared to adapt to the changes ahead of us, that my loved ones aren't prepared to adapt to the changes ahead of us, that my employees and the people around me aren't prepared for that, or that the pressures that other people face because they're not prepared will also affect the lives of those that I care about. So that's a really big concern for me. It's something I'm genuinely afraid of. That's something I've created a business around trying to solve in a niche way around agriculture that's important to me. I think the things I'm most excited about are, I'm most excited about the lessons we learn along the way. So as we lose things as human beings, we have evidence that we learn things. And so part of the way we progress is by losing, is by suffering. It happens in our personal lives, it happens for cities, it happens for society. And so my hope is that, and what I'm excited about is the lessons we learn along that way, that may make us stronger in the end as a human society. Whether we have significant costs around that, I think we probably will. But I think the society that may emerge after those costs will be better than the society we have today.
based on your expertise, first of all, if you could just say define what you believe your expertise is. What do you think are two areas that need further exploration, or two trends?
So my area of expertise is urban agriculture and local food systems. So what I'm really good at is estimating the yields, the energy, the labor, all of the capital and operational costs that relate to commercial urban farming. And so why that's important is because there's so little data about that. Agriculture has been moved away from our cities, and so has the knowledge on how to do that. And agriculture typically has very data sets that don't give people wanting to start new farms sufficient data to move confidently into that. So my job, my company's job, is to fill in that gap and to allow entrepreneurs that have motivations to develop commercial urban farming and improve the food system and its resilience, we allow them to be able to do that. And so, I think the two areas that are really missing on that is one, the job skills area. There's not enough people who actually have the skills to even fill in the jobs that the companies that I work for are creating. So that's a concern for me. And I think also policy and the way that cities are very, very slow typically to respond to the changes that are needed. And there's not significant evidence yet that cities are making the required policy changes to kind of allow for the development of something like urban agriculture at scale. Zoning is needed to change. A lot more incentives, a lot more value and understanding of the variety is needed.
And why is urban architecture, sorry, why is urban agriculture important?
Urban agriculture is important because globally it already has an impact. It provides 15 to 20% of our food supply. And as the Western societies have said, most of that food supply is happening in non-developed or developing societies. So as cities develop in history, they tend to move agriculture out of the city. That may have worked in the past, or it's worked for us pretty well. We feed more people, we've had a green revolution, we've been able to optimize a lot of the systems, increase yield, but the consequences of disconnecting food from our society is less resilience. So we have less resilience to acute shocks in the system, we're less prepared from a knowledge perspective, from an actual food security perspective, the amount of food we grow near a city. We have significant risks as far as the increased costs from importing food that could happen as those shocks happen in the system. So we've made a trade-off. We've said we're going to value buildings and commercial and residential real estate over agriculture because we don't see that as a viable livelihood. Those consequences we will have to pay for. It's a trade-off. We didn't solve the problem. We just moved the problem somewhere else. And so it's so important that we begin to think about cities and buildings as productive, not only from food, that's what I'm focused on, but from a water, energy, and food perspective. If we don't transform the city from being consumers but into producers, we're going to have a very, very difficult and possibly impossible time to be resilient to the shocks in the system that are predicted as they relate to climate change or even more complexity if you look into economics or society overall. And so it's critical for me that we do that for those reasons. There's so many different ways now with technology to grow more varieties closer and create businesses around it. And I think people have just forgotten the global context. And we did that a little bit today too, right? We forgot about the global south, or we chose to remove that. Right. And as a result, we're missing some of the lessons and the things they do well, which tends to actually typically happen when there's scarcity. So when you see scarcity on the urban periphery of Mexico City, you see innovation.
They're super innovative.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
The there's microfinancing, there's so many examples of this. And so this attitude that agriculture isn't part of the city implies that being productive and being a maker and being efficient with very few resources and understanding those resources isn't part of urban life. I mean, when did urban life become, exchanging money and buying things and creating waste? Yeah.
Consumption and waste.
Why is that the superior economic pinnacle of urban society? I don't think it is. I think we've made a trade-off,
right.
and we need to go. So
people grow up and it's not even in their frame of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Hong Kong and Tokyo. I was not engaged in this at all, right? But then something clicked for me. I said, this is a real gap. Something needs to happen here. And what's so exciting is that we're finding successful models. There's ways to make money for the entrepreneurs. There's ways to create affordable food. Sure, many urban farms provide more food for the elites, but as with any technology, as that gets more democratized, those costs will go down, but only if we value it, right? Only if we.
There's an education problem.
Right. So I just want cities to value, food and water as much as they value Wi-Fi, and they don't make smart city plans that include food and water.
Right.
You look at Cape Town, they had a citywide Wi-Fi plan and no plan for water. I mean,
yeah,
this is a real, maybe there's other things we're missing if that happened, right? Maybe there's other things we're not considering on the agenda if that happened. And so affordable housing, I get it. Like in New York, they say, it's just not a big enough priority for us. The mayor's put it in his writing that he's going to convert spaces into urban farms. He hasn't done anything about it, right? So we're lobbying, we're pushing, and they say, oh, it's about affordable housing, it's about affordable. I don't understand. How can you have affordable housing without food and water? Like, how is that a long-term solution, right? They could be the same thing, right? So it's a really long and ambitious and complex challenge to solve, but that's the mission I'm on. So.
Well, thank you. It's super cool. Thank you. It's great to meet you.
Yeah.